Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Good evening, good morning, good night, good afternoon, wherever you are, whoever you are. Welcome back to Voice in the Wilderness. I am Maxie, your host. Thank you for joining us as we take a deep dive into who is the Satan? Who is Satan? A peek into Satan. This is not a peek. This is a kind of a open the door and look see. But welcome anyway. I hope that you guys have been enjoying this series. For me, it's awesome because when you read the biblical narrative and you hear how God speaks, you can't help but understand that if God created everything, if He is in all with all, there is nothing that's outside of Him. Everything that is within Him. He is the one who covers everything. He is the one who is outside, if I could say it like that. He is the one who is out on the perimeter, on the surface, on the perimeter, on the area. He is surrounding us. And everything that He creates is within Him, is within His reach. Nothing happens by surprise. He's in full control. He knows the end from the very beginning. And when you understand these things, your perception, and again, we want to kind of hop on that word a little bit. It's amazing how important perception is. And one of the biggest reasons why people disagree is because they have different perceptions. They see things in a different way. And that's where disagreements come. Because you look at the color and you say, well, it looks a little green. And I say, no, I think it's blue. And we could both be right. In some cases, I think truth stands on its own. Truth cannot be erased. It can be hidden. It can be hidden for a time. But it always manifests itself somewhere, somehow. Truth has a way of escaping. It's like water. You can harness water, you can harvest it, you can put it in a dam. But at some point, the water will find a way of escape. Whether it takes 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And if you don't put things in place to prevent that escape or to manage the escape of the water, it will escape eventually. And so that's kind of what we're looking at. We're looking at the biblical narrative. We're looking at truth as it is told through the biblical narrative. And again, as we have discussed in the past two series specifically targeted with this word, adversary, Satan. But I think now the series is like maybe 5 parts, because we did serpent, we did enemy. I think we did serpent for 2, we did enemy for maybe 2 or 3, and now we're dealing with the adversary and Satan. It's kind of both of them because the word is interchangeable. The word Satan means Satan. That word means adversary. Adversary could mean Satan. And as I said before, one one is a noun, and you can use it as a noun, but you could also use it as an adjective, right? To describe the actions of an entity or a person, right? So last week we talked again. We went back into the Chronicle, First Chronicles 20. It's 21. First Chronicles 21, I think it is, and Second Samuel 22, 24. I think it is. And for just to make sure, let me go First Chronicles 21. Let me see if that's it. That's what it is. Yes. First Chronicles 21, and the other part, or the other version of the same story. Again, we just talk about colors. One person see greenish, right? And the other person see, oh, that's blue. It's the same thing we're talking about here. One person says Satan. The other person says Jehovah. So who is correct? Who is right? Is Satan Jehovah? Is Jehovah Satan? You know, and it sounds blasphemic to even say those things, right? And I'm not saying it to blaspheme. I'm saying it to draw a point, to draw your attention to the fact that in the chronicle narrative, First Chronicles 21, the writer of that narrative declares Satan stood up against Israel. In the Samuel narrative, 2 Samuel 24 narrative, that writer declares Jehovah's anger burned against Israel. So Jehovah's anger in the Samuel narrative is described in the Chronicle narrative as the Satan, as the adversary. Again, when we look at these two things, right? You can be adversary. I can be an adversary. When you stand against something, that is being a Satan. Okay? See, and I was thinking about this over the past few hours, right? Particularly this morning. When you listen to people in the know, professors and so on, I was listening this week to Dr. James Tabor, and when you understand how languages work, it's amazing to me that today English language is the prevalent language, it's the dominant language. And yet the English language is so obscure and difficult. It paints things in a completely different perspective sometimes. And when you think about the human being and you think about how important words are so important to the human being. And when you misappropriate words, you also misappropriate understandings. And you misappropriate perceptions. So, if you think that language is not important and words is not important, if you think that you don't have to think about what you say and how you say what you say, if you think like that, you don't understand the importance of words. Words shape everything, right? As a matter of fact, there is a move. I was hearing recently, there is a move to change meanings of certain words, like black. You know, the meaning of the word black, because the word black has some bad connotations to it. Black, dark, you know, it's black is evil, it's not good, and all these things. And because that word black carry these connotations, there is a move to try to extract these connotations from the word, which again, you go into language and into a lot of technical things about languages, and people can do that, right? As a matter of fact, I don't know if you ever heard me say, but I was listening to Brad Scott years ago. Brad Scott, and in one of his teachings, Brad Scott said that through one of the historical narratives behind, I think it's Alexander the Great, is that Alexander the Great wanted to conquer the world in his time, right? In his day and age, when he was a conqueror. That's what he did. If you look at the movie Alexander, that's that's what it depicts. It depicts this conquering man who his intention was to conquer for Greece the majority of the world, if not the whole world. And Brad was saying that after many conquests, when his demeanor started to diminish pertaining to the idea of conquering the world, he was told by one of his philosophers that there are other ways to conquer the world. I want you to hear this. This is during the King Alexander the Great, right? Alexander the Great was told by one of his philosophers that there are other ways he can conquer the world and still achieve the goal of conquering the world. And one of the ways he was told is, he said, if you want to conquer the world, you change their language. You change their language. When you change a language, you change words, you change meanings of words, then you change people's perception. Over a period of time, people begin to perceive things differently. Okay? And just so you know, English language, that is the predominant language in the world today, the English language came out of the Greek language. Right? It came out of Latin, Latin came out of Greek. See what I'm saying? So, when you think about that, the etymology, whatever that word is, you know the word I'm talking about. I'm trying to say that I can't say it. The undercurrent, the foundations. When you go back through time, just like we go back through time in history of the world, history of mankind, history of whatever, the same thing, when you go through the history of language, you realize that maybe Alexander the Great did in fact achieve his goal of conquering the world. Because today, our mentality, our perceptions our way of thinking is predominantly Roman Greco. Roman Greco, right? And for those of you who've read the Bible and studied, listened to people, different professors and doctorates and so on and so on, you would be familiar with that term, Roman Greco, because there was Greece, it was Rome, or it was Rome and then Greece, and the two maybe different eras, but the same kind of principles, some of the same philosophies. The leaders, they developed the same ideologies, same perceptions, that kind of thing. So, is Roman Greco. And that way of thinking is completely different to the Hebrew, to the Middle Eastern Hebraic, Aramaic kind of thinking. It's different. The philosophies are different, even though sometimes they meet somewhere along the path. Okay? Because just as in Greek, there's a lot of mysticism and a lot of mystery and mysterious things, so too in the Hebraic cultures, right? In the Hebrew, there's a lot of mysticism and all these things. Even I was talking to some buddies of mine last week, Sunday night, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, on Monday, somewhere there. And one of the guys was referencing, the Genesis story about the woman and the serpent. It's a mystical thing. When you read it, how can a serpent talk? You know what I'm saying? It's mystical. It's mysterious, right? And so in some ways, languages kind of culminate into this mythical, mysterious world. They meet there, right? So when you think about words and languages, you have to think about perceptions and understandings, because all of those things are connected, right? They're connected. Everything you look at, everything you think about have to do with words, whether you know it or not. If you look at a picture, you're trying to develop an opinion on the picture, right? What you think about the picture, well, what you think about something has to do with words. You formulate words. I think that picture is abstract, or it's oblique, or it's specific, or it's whatever. You see what I'm saying? I see this and I see... You use words to describe everything. So in the context of what we are talking about, a peek into Satan. Who is this Satan? What is this Satan? This devil, this adversary, this enemy, this serpent, this snake. It has to do with the perceptions in our mind. It has to do with the doctrines we have been indoctrinated with. The teachings that we have sat under for years and years and years. The words we have heard preachers and pastors and evangelists and prophets and apostles say. It has to do with all of that. You didn't just develop your perceptions and ideals on your own. Didn't just happen, poof. All of a sudden it just bam, this is what you think. Oh, this is what I think. No, that came from somewhere. And that's what I'm talking about. So when you look at the Chronicle narrative, 1 Chronicles 21, first verse, 2 Samuel 24, first verse. When you look at the two narratives, it's the same story. The car looked greenish yellow, greenish blue. No, I think that car looked blue. It's a blue car. No, it's a green car. Satan stood up against Israel. Chronicles. Samuel says, Jehovah had an ought against Israel. And that lends credence to what Jehovah has said time and time again all over the biblical narrative. I, Jehovah, I create evil. I create the smith that bloweth the coals into the fire, that bringeth forth an instrument for his work. So, when you talk about the Satan or Satan, who are you speaking about? Is he a person? Is he a thing? Because in the narratives that we just divulged, we just looked at, are you saying Jehovah is Satan? No, but if you could say that, you could say Jehovah is an adversary. Let's read. Let's look at a couple passages, right, and see if I prove my point. Exodus 23. Exodus 23. Turning your Bibles to Exodus chapter 23. Okay, you there? Go down to verse 20. So Exodus 23. That's only. Exodus 23 and 20 says these words. We're going to read a few of the verses, okay? I'm going to show you. Behold, Exodus 23 and 20 says, behold, I send an angel before you to keep you by the way, to bring you into the place which I have prepared for you. Who's saying that? God, Jehovah is speaking. Right? Behold, I send an angel before you to keep you by the way, to bring you into the place which I have prepared. He goes on, verse 21. Pay attention to him and listen to his voice. Do not provoke him, for he will not pardon your disobedience. That's another word you're going to hear throughout this ministry. That's one of our words we earmark to nail and to push, to talk about disobedience. What is it? To bring it, always keep it to the forefront, because it's important for us to understand that is not what we want to go for. That word disobedience, we don't want to follow that word. We want to follow a word that comes out of that word, or a word that is part of that word, a word obedience. And that's another word that you would hear coming through this ministry all the time. Disobedience, you would hear obedience. Those are the words you would hear. Perceptions, those are the things that we target as words to repeat constantly, to remind us, to keep us, to help us, to move us, to push us, to draw us, to pull us. He says, pay attention to him and listen to his voice. Exodus 23 and 21. Do not provoke him. It's an interesting word. For he will not pardon your disobedience. The angel that I am sending ahead of you, his assignment, his task is to carry you along the way, is to keep you in the way, is to bring you to the place which I have prepared for you. However, you have to pay attention to him. You have to listen to his voice. You should not provoke him. Please do not provoke him. For his assignment does not incorporate a pardon of your sins. That is not what he does. This angel is not gifted with the ability to pardon your sin. This angel that I am sending before you will not do it. He doesn't have the capability to do it because it was not imputed to him to do that. It was imputed to him to keep you, to protect you, to guard you, to bring you, to show you, to pull you, to drive you in the way to that place, to take you to that place. That's his assignment. End of story. If you disobey, if you provoke him, he will take you to task. He will take you out. Maybe, perhaps, he will hurt you. Do not provoke him. Right? I'm reminded of, you've seen these videos of the guards in the Buckingham Palace. You know, these guards who stand at attention for hours on end. And you've seen videos where people go and they try to get them to move. Because, they were trained not to move. They stand there and they're not supposed to move. And people go and, do things in front of them. I'm not sure if you're allowed to touch them. But people do stuff to get them to see if they can get them to move. Well, that is provoking. You know what I'm saying? That is like, let me go and get him to move. You do that with that angel, he just might take you out. See, we have the wrong perception of our God. We have the incorrect perception of who God is. Yes, God loves us. Man, he will fight tooth and nail for us, but he will also take us out. He will whoop our behinds left, right, and center. So do not play. And we have the language here. Okay? We have the language here. Pay attention to him. Listen to his voice. Do not provoke him because he is not given the charge okay, if they do anything, just let them slide. It's okay. I'll do that part. No. He's not charged with that. He's not given that kind of grace. Okay? He might take you out. So don't provoke him. Why don't provoke him? For he will not pardon your disobedience. Why? Why is he not going to pardon your disobedience? Because my name is in him. That's huge, people. At the end of this session, and if you have listened to all of my teachings, at the end of every teaching, you would hear the words read from Numbers 6:22 through 27, which is known as the Aaronic blessing, which God taught the children of Aaron and his sons, about imputing his name, Jehovah's name, on the children of Israel. And you might take it for granted, but that is of tantamount importance. Because here in this passage, we read where God says, pay attention to my angel, listen to his voice. Listen, don't provoke him. Do not provoke him. For he will not pardon your disobedience, because my name is in him. The angel carries my name, Jehovah. That says a lot. I'm going to leave that right there for now. Verse 22. But if you indeed listen to his voice and do all that I speak. See, did you hear that? if you listen to the voice of the angel and do all that I speak. Did you hear that? Who else in the biblical narrative talks like that? One they call Yeshua. Yeshua said, I only say the things my Father says. Sounds like you've heard that somewhere before. I only do what my Father does. I and my Father are one. If you see me, you see my Father. That's the language of Yeshua. That's the essence of him. That's the embodiment of Yeshua. That's who he was. So he was the Father. If you look at it like that. So if you have the right perception, when you see him, you will see the Father. Remember he told his disciples, when his disciple says, well, show us the Father, you know. How you could say you're going to the Father? We've never seen the Father. Can you show us the Father? And he said, come on. How long you've been with me or something like that. He said, if you see me, you see the Father. Remember that in the Gospels? So there is that language. Here is the same language. Jehovah says, I'm sending an angel. So you would think that Jehovah is one entity and the angel is another entity. Okay, that's fair. Then you hear him say, listen to the angel's voice. Do not provoke him, for he will not pardon your disobedience. Why? Because my name, Jehovah, is in the angel. Okay? Take that for what it's worth. Leave it right there. Then he comes back and says, but if you indeed listen to the angel's voice, paraphrasing, if you listen to his voice, and if you do all that I speak, so when the angel says, make a left at the top of the hill, right? If the angel says, okay, when everybody get to the top of the hill, go left. Who is, Jehovah says, that's me speaking through the angel. So the angel is speaking, but it's my words, if you will. Okay, remember we talking about, okay, I'm telling you all. So, he says, if you make the left, if you indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then, listen, because we went there for a reason. And the reason is to show you that Jehovah could be a Satan, or Jehovah could stand up against you, against me, and be an adversary. Because hear what he says. If you listen to his voice and do everything I say, then, listen, I, Jehovah, will be an enemy to your enemies. And then he says, I would be an adversary to your adversaries. So, if the angel says, top of the hill, everybody could make a left. And for whatever reason, people get to the top of the hill and go straight over or make a right. What happens then? What happens then? What do you think will happen? He said he wouldn't pardon your disobedience, remember? So, if he doesn't pardon your disobedience, if he punishes your disobedience, then Jehovah is no longer an enemy to your enemies. He's no longer an adversary to your adversaries. Jehovah will now become an adversary to you. He would beats. He would stand against you. Why? Because we doing the wrong thing. He voiced the angel said go left. When we got up to the top, we decided to go right. Or we say, I ain't going left, I'm going straight. For whatever the reason. Doesn't matter. Right? You see the language. So when we look at these words, adversary and Satan, and we always point out, say he is a Satan and he's, that's the devil in him, right? I know this past couple of weeks, the big thing out there was the Will Smith slapping Chris Rock thing on the tube in front of millions and millions of people, and everybody have their opinion, and Will Smith talking about God and the things. And listen, be careful, okay? Be very careful about what you say. Be very careful about the things you say, okay? And this message is not just for you, but it's for Will too. Will better be careful about what he says and what God is calling him to do. And how Denzel just told him, be careful because the devil is, well, again, we on topic, but if you follow Will, if you follow what he says, if you follow what happened, and if you look at it objectively, who is operating in God and who is operating as the adversary? Because Denzel Washington told him, according to what he said, be careful, because when you're at the top of when you're at your pinnacle, the devil coming for you. Is the devil coming for you? Or maybe the devil is in you. Maybe you become your own adversary. Maybe you withstanding something. Maybe you're doing stuff you don't know what's going on. But we bring God in as a cover, as a shield. I'm doing God's work. Well, you slap a man, how you could justify that as God's work? I'm not saying it's not God's work, because I'm telling you. I'm saying that when you look at all the pieces, right? Because, I heard what Chris said to his wife, Will's wife. I don't think it was, I'm not a comedian, right? And it's a dangerous thing to talk about people's family, okay? It's something you don't want to do. Comedians have a way of doing it and getting away with it. I ain't touching that. Again, go back to what I said earlier on. If you don't think that there is nothing, that you don't care about how you say what you say and words is not important and all that, then that scenario there, it explains exactly what we're talking about here. So, Chris, I don't watch the Academy Awards, right? I didn't see the whole awards. I just, because of that situation, you kind of want to, okay, what really happened? And so you see all the clips. You heard what was said in public, what Chris said on the stage. And what he said, it is. I'm not a comedian. I love comedy. I listen to all kinds of comedy. raunchy ones sometimes, which I'm like, really, man? And people have this way, they use the raunchy stuff to, I guess, I don't know. Why? Why they had to curse so much? And why they had to be so explicit in some of the things they talk about? You wonder. But this just, it gives you an insight into people's minds. Again, I deal a lot with perceptions, okay? I deal a lot with how people perceive things, how I perceive things. So I look at a lot of things. You see what I'm saying? From the perspective of getting on, everything's not the devil. Okay? It's about perception. And you cannot correct a perception if you don't look at the perception, if you don't examine perceptions. You can't correct your own self if you don't look at your own actions and think about your own words and your own thoughts and your own things. You can't do anything about anything without thinking about it, without looking at it, examining it, and seeing where maybe you need to change this or that, maybe you need to do something different, or act. So, what Chris said, based on what was shown, to me, he's a comedian. That's what they all do. That's it. I don't live in their world. They don't live in mine. I'm looking at this objectively. To me, it was, he made a joke. It wasn't a horrible joke. It wasn't a funny joke. Like, really funny. He was laughing and smiling. Will was laughing and smiling. Everybody was laughing. That's kind of what it was. Right? So okay, something said so innocently went to that length where at some point one person decided to get up and walk up on stage in front of the world and smack somebody else down. Whether it was a publicity stunt, whether it was real, fake, it doesn't matter. None of that is really, really important. I'm talking about perceptions, right? One person is talking and the perception of themselves in the position that they're in and what they're being paid to do comes out, right? That they're paid to make jokes and make people laugh and make the atmosphere as light as possible so people wouldn't come and be bored. Right? Preachers do it too. So it had nothing to do with Hollywood or anything. Everybody, if you're a motivational speaker, if you you do, everybody does the same thing. Everybody do it across the board. Newscasters, it doesn't matter. If you speak in public, if you don't develop some kind of a excitable, bubbly personality, chances are you might be just boring. Yeshua wasn't boring. God ain't boring at all. Nowhere in this green earth God is ever boring. I'm telling you right now. That man is the trip. I love him. So, looking at perceptions, right? Rock perceives, okay, he's got leeway to kind of say a lot of stuff, all in comedy. Well, look at the result. Look what happened. Because words affect perceptions. Words affect humans. Not the devil. Devil had nothing to do with it. You heard something, you didn't like what you heard, at some point, you didn't like what you heard, because before that, you were laughing. So something happened in a flash of a second, and you were moved. Right? I think Paul or Peter, one of them, says what? Be angry, but sin not. Okay? Denzel Washington said, be careful, because when you stand up on your pinnacle, the devil is coming for you. It had nothing to do with the devil. It has everything to do with your perception. If you think you're all that, and let me just say this here, we all know it, it's true. Money, I'm telling you something. Money doesn't change people. Money, my old bishop used to say, money doesn't change anybody. Money makes you more of what you really are. So if you're a fool and you have a lot of money, money will make you a bigger fool. If you're smart and you have a lot of money, money might make you more smart or more stupid. Right? So money just makes you bigger. Money just shines a bigger light on who you are. That's why wise people who have a lot of money they come out of the limelight. They try not to be in the limelight. You know? And when they're doing things, they try to just do it and don't say anything to anybody. That's a biblical principle. Don't let your right hand know what your left hand doing. That's a biblical principle. If you're doing something, just do it. You don't have to talk about what you do. I give $1 million here and I give $2 million away. You don't have to do that. You understand what I'm saying? So it's about perception. Had nothing to do with the devil. The woman in the garden had nothing to do with the devil. It's her perception was thwarted. Has nothing to do with the devil. It wasn't the serpent's fault. If she had held fast to what she was told, she would have pushed him out of the way. But no, he came, he said what he said, and her perception got twisted. And that's why God said, oh, so now you think you're God. See, that's how my perception changed with reading that verse. Not, oh wow, so now you like me. No, that's not what he was saying. Oh, so now you think you're like me, huh? Okay, we'll see. Get out. Listen, if you was like me, I couldn't put you out. See what I'm saying? Because me putting you out shows you that I'm still in charge. She eating the fruit, and then God saying, your desire will be to your husband, but he will rule over you. That's God saying you try to usurp authority over him, but I'm reversing that. So we've got to, if we don't examine our perceptions and alter them the way we need to, we are going to continue down this path. And I'm telling you, we are continuing down this path. Not because I say so, but because the prophets before me have said so. Because people who've lived long before me have said, this is how we are. And if we keep doing this, we will continue the same way until God comes and restores things. Prophets, I'm not the first one saying that. It has been said. Over the passage of time, it has been said over and over again. Read the biblical narrative. We have to change our perceptions. That's the only way you can change your ways. Paul says in a different way, renew your mind. Without a renewing of your mind, without a correction in your perception, we will continue to do the same things. We will continue to think the same way. We will continue to think that God, oh, he's not going to hurt me. I could be as disobedient as I want. God is not going to hurt me. That's a false perception. God is going to whoop your butt. Understand that. Know that. And try as hard as you can to be obedient. Because he said, the angel that I'm sending before you to bring you in the way, we just read, he is not going to pardon your disobedience. That's not his job. That's my job. I can pardon your disobedience. I'm the only one who can pardon you. But you've got to be obedient. When you are found to be disobedient and you have been chastised and you have been corrected, then you need to walk in that correction. I'm saying that because that's the correct perception. We are to set aside the lies that we have been told about the instructions are null and void. We don't have to listen to them instructions. No. Are we believers in God or are we believers in Paul? Paul has said all these things. But when you go back and read the words of Yeshua, the words that Yeshua supposedly said, when you go back and read the Gospels, where do you see Yeshua saying, don't worry, when I go, you don't have to do none of this stuff? You tell me where you see Yeshua say that. Not Paul. Tell me where, point out the lines in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John where Yeshua said, don't worry, when I gone, when I come back, while I'm here, you don't have to do none of that stuff. No, while he lived, according to the biblical narrative, he was doing the same thing I'm trying to do. I'm not him. Don't stop it. Stop your foolishness. He was saying the same things I'm saying. Correct your perception. Okay? Don't tell me I can't go out and get something to eat. Don't tell me that my disciples had to wash their hands. Listen, those are the things you focus on. Those are minor things. Major on the majors and minor on the minors. Your perception is thwarted. You're getting bent out of shape on the wrong things. The Sabbath wasn't made for man. How it go? Man wasn't made for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man. Right? I made the Sabbath for you because I made the Sabbath for me. Right? Because we were made before the Sabbath. We were made on the 6th day. Read the Genesis narrative. And what happened after we were created? God rested because all his work was done. So he took a rest. So he created that day for himself and then invites us to listen. Hey, this is a party day. We having a big party. Come on, join us. Me and my boys. When you refuse to do that, you slapping him in his face. You telling him, I don't want nothing you create. You think he's going to take kindly to that? Really? Come on, people. It's the perception that we have been fed for generations. He came and he took away the Torahs. He took away the instructions. He did not. He performed every single one. He did the Sabbath day. And when they challenged him, well, why are you healing people on the Sabbath day? He said, so, hold up a second. What's better to do on the Sabbath? Do good or do evil? Right? He said, if your animal fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, won't you get up off your chair, off your bed, or wherever you are? Won't you get up and go rescue that animal? Are you so inhumane that you're going to leave an animal in the pit to suffer all day because you're not supposed to work? Oh! You see what I'm saying? You're majoring on the majors and you're majoring on the minors and minoring on the majors. So he all his life walking on the earth, he is trying to readjust, to realign, to refocus those people who say they know everything. And we know the Torah. Good master, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Well, do the commandments. Isn't that funny? That he didn't say, well, I'm here to, you don't have to do nothing. Just live. He didn't say, be good, be a good person. He didn't say, just help people out and give money to the poor and stuff. He didn't say that. When he was asked the question, what must I do to inherit eternal life? He said, do what the commandments say. Am I lying? Somebody please. Take me to task. Tell me I'm lying. That's what Yeshua said. And the young man came back and said, I've done these things all my life. Since I was born, I've been doing them. Keeping the commandments. Yeshua said, yeah, really? True? You keeping the commandments? Okay. Let me give you a commandment right now. Take all you have, go sell it, and take the money and give it to the poor. And what happened? What happened? The narrative says the young man turned and walked away downtrodden. He walked away. His countenance fell. He was like distraught. And the biblical narrative also tells you why he was distraught. Because that was a hard saying. That was a hard word. Why? Because he was a filthy rich man. He was filthy rich. That was like Jesus telling Bezos or Zuckerberg and all them filthy rich people. Sell all the money you have and take it and sell all your possessions. Take your money and give it to the poor. And come follow me. That's what he said. What does he mean follow me? Follow me where? Follow me to your death. Follow me to my death and your death. Obey the commandments. Live the way I tell you to live. Do the things I ask you to do, and you will inherit eternal life. Obey my Father like I am obeying my Father, and you will have eternal life. But no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to. So we make up the story about we don't have to. Listen, people. Listen. If we don't get it, we will lose it. We have to correct the perception. We have to. Let's read another verse. We are looking at the words adversary, Satan. Let's go to Job. Let's read that narrative in Job. You can't get a better description of that than Job. You can't get it. It's plain. It's simple. It's in your face. Job says, there was a man in the land, Job chapter 1 verse 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. The man was blameless and upright, who feared God and turned away from evil. That's how a man becomes blameless and upright. He has to fear God and turn away from evil. But if you don't know what evil is, if you think slapping somebody, that's a good thing, if you think that's a good thing, you're wrong. If your motive for slapping that person is thinking that that person is the devil, you might be wrong. What makes a man blameless and upright is you have to fear God and turn away from evil. But you have to know what evil is. You can't do evil and think that you're a blameless person. No. You cannot be afraid of God and think that you're a blameless person. A blameless person is one who fears God. Not me. Don't fear me. Don't fear the person sitting next to you. Fear Elohim, Yehovah. That's the one you have to fear. And not just fear him, because when you fear him, you begin to get knowledge, you begin to get wisdom. That will help you do the other part. Know what evil is and turn away from evil. Let's continue to read. There was born to Job, that man, that blameless man who feared God and turned away from evil, 7 sons and 3 daughters. So he had 10 children. 7 sons, 3 daughters. Those of you who like numbers and stuff, run with that. I'm not running. I'm just staying right here. His possessions also were 7,000 sheep. He was a rancher. 3,000 camels. 500 yoke of oxen. 500 yoke of oxen. Is that 1,000 oxes? Oxen? Is that 1,000? I don't know. A yoke of oxen, to me, in my mind, I'm not saying this is what it is. I'm just thinking. Now, as I read it, you normally yoke 2 oxen together. Or 2 ox together. All right? Ox is singular. Oxen is plural. So a yoke of oxen, as I'm thinking about it now, I could be completely wrong. It should be 2. So if you have 500 yoke of oxen, I'm just saying maybe it's 1,000 oxes. If I, just to make the point, it's not oxes, it's oxen. I'm just saying. But let's go with the 500. I just thought about that, What's a yoke of oxen? Right? 500 female donkeys. And a very great household. So that the man was the greatest of all the children of the east. Didn't say the greatest in the world. He said all the children in the east, wherever the east is, he was the greatest of them all because of all his possessions and the amount of finances he had. Okay? Listen. His sons, these 7 sons, went and held a feast in the house of each one on his birthday. So that is 7 of them. It's 7 birthdays in 1 year. So that is 7 parties they're having in 1 year. 7 feasts. You say feast, I say party, just to make it in today's language. We're talking about words and languages, right? Parties, 7 parties, 7 birthday parties, 7 birthday get-togethers in however form they take. There's 7 of them, 7 sons, and each son had a birthday party for his birthday. They celebrated. And they alone didn't celebrate by themselves, but they sent and called their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. So these parties, these celebrations had food and drink. Don't know what kind of drink. And if you ever hear me mention this story, they had wine back in them days. Is men, is women, is male and female. I'm just saying. Maybe the sisters had friends that they brought their friends. I don't know. Your mind could go wherever it wants to go with these little bit of information here. But if you lived in this world and was a part of it for any length of time, you could probably get a good idea of what kind of party this could turn out to be. With boys and girls, men and women. Eat and drink. I'll leave it like that. Verse 5. Listen. We're talking about perceptions. Who is Satan? Who is God? What's right? What's wrong? What's good? What's bad? What's evil? Who is doing it? And why? We know Job was blameless because he feared God and he turned his back on evil. Anything that in his perception was evil, he didn't want to have nothing to do with it. Verse 5 says, it was so when the days of their feasting had run their course, that Job sent and sanctified them. Let's talk about that. What does that mean? Job sent and sanctified them. Well, sanctified in this era, in this time, all that meant was letting them bathe and change the clothes and chill out for a moment. Rest. Don't do nothing. Like Sabbath. Just set yourself apart from everything. Bathe, take a wash, clean yourself, put on clean clothes, and just stay away from everything. Okay? Give you a little synopsis. He sent and sanctified them. And he rose up early in the morning, and he offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. Well, is that 7 burnt offerings or 10 burnt offerings? We don't know. But we don't know if it's 20 burnt offerings. According to the number of them all, if you strictly put it to the kids, then it's 10. Okay? So he sent and he sanctified the children, specifically the boys. No pun intended with the girls and all that stuff. I'm not a male chauvinist. Okay? Specifically, according to the narrative, if we keep everything in context, specifically the boys. Okay? I might be wrong. Why is he sanctifying them? Why is he offering burnt offerings on their behalf? Why? Motive. When you say why, it speaks to motive. Why did you do that? Why did you slap the man? Because he talked about your wife. But what did he say about your wife? He didn't call her any names. He didn't say nothing nasty about her. He didn't call her out her name. He paid her a compliment. At least from what I heard, it wasn't nasty. And a matter of fact, if you look at the picture, if you know who we're talking about, she's gorgeous by world standards. She is awesome, beautiful by world standards. Even with a hairstyle. Now, if she's not doing too well medically, that's a different story. But we don't know that. We didn't know that until now, right? Maybe Chris was in the same position. Maybe he didn't know. But if you go by being objective, facial and stuff, nothing wrong. There's nothing evil by what he said. So why was he slapped? What's the motive? Why did Job offer offerings? Why did he send and tell them, sanctify yourself, bathe, change your clothes, put on clean clothes, go in your room. I'm just making this other part up there. Going in your room and don't hang out with nobody, no more friends. Why is he offering burnt offerings and sacrifices? Why is he having them bathe and change their clothes? This is why. We're getting an insight into why. Because in verse 5, Job said, it may be. He's not sure. He's not 100% sure. But he's saying, just in case my sons did something that they weren't supposed to do. Just in case they did evil and they didn't fear God, I'm going to have to do something to hopefully get them forgiven. Or I'm going to have to intercede with my offering and my sanctification instructions, and perhaps God will forgive them for whatever they may have done. Remember, Job had no idea. He don't know. He don't know because he wasn't there. Because if he was there, I'm pretty sure he would know. Because if I'm going to a party with my sons, I'm telling you, something must jump off where you see something. And thereby will put you in the know. Okay? So, he said it may be that my sons have sinned and renounced God in their hearts. Now, he didn't say that maybe my sons stood up on the table and did a strip club dance and denounce God, then publicly say, hey, God, we don't care about you tonight. You know, we denounce. They denounce God in their heart. How do you denounce God in your heart? You denounce God in your heart by doing something that God doesn't want you to do. I could slap myself. You know why? Because we all do that. At some point or the other, we do some stuff and be like, oh man, why did I do that? In that moment, we denounce God. In that moment. In that moment. I'm not saying you denounce God forever and ever. I'm just saying, in that moment, when you go and do the thing that you're not supposed to do, you denounce God in your heart. Listen, we have to change our perception. We have to. Because if we don't, we will lose people. I'm telling you, I'm begging you. We will lose. Big time. Job is saying, these boys, they keep having these feasts, and I have to keep doing these things because I don't know what they're doing. So I'm taking precautions. I'm trying to, there's my sons and my daughters, so I have to kind of protect them. I have to do what I can do to protect them. You know, they're old enough. They own people now. I can't decide for them. Like we can't decide for nobody else. All we could do is what we can do to try to protect them somehow. Pray for them. If we get a chance to talk to them, try to encourage them to move away from the things that they're doing and so on and so on. But we can't force them. I can't force nobody to do anything. I have 2 sons. I can't force them to do anything. They have their own minds. They have their own lanes, if you will. And you can make them do something that in their heart and in their mind, they perceive in a different way. All you could do is talk and show them and do the right thing before them. And hope that at some point they get what you're saying and they begin to do what you're saying. That's all you can do. If you make them do stuff, well, they will only do it for a time. God doesn't make you do anything. He encourages you to do the right thing. He shows you, hey, if you do the right thing, I'm going to bless you, I'm going to keep you, I'm going to protect you, I'm going to guide you, and all these things. But if you insist on doing the wrong thing, I'm going to turn my back on you. I'm going to walk away from you. I'll become your adversary. He says that time and time again, over and over again. So when you doing the wrong thing and you getting slapped and kicked and cuffed, not necessarily physically, when stuff coming down, you have to examine what am I doing to incur all this stuff. Again, you might be doing the right thing, and then you apply what James and them talk about, or Paul and them talk about. Count it all joy when you fall into diverse situations because of the way you do things. If you're doing the right things, if you're obeying God and bad things happening to you, count it all joy. But you could only make a choice or make a decision in how to count it joy and what to count as joy when you have the right perception. Everything is born out of that. You have to be able to discern what is good and what is evil. If you don't know what that is, then you might do something and think you're doing something good, and it might be evil, or vice versa. And verse 5 ends with, Job did so, he did it continually, mean over and over again. Every time they have a party, he had to tell them, go take a bath, go wash yourself, clean yourself, stay to yourself, sanctify. Sanctify is separate, set apart yourself. I had to go make a burnt offering for you and all the people who was there, or you alone, or whatever. And he did this over and over again. And saying nothing about the devil. These first 5 verses didn't say anything about Satan. Didn't say anything about the devil. Didn't say anything about a serpent or none of that. Those words are not in those first 5 verses. But in the 5 verses, we see evil. We see fear God. We see how rich the people was. We see how much children he had. We see what the people used to do on their birthdays. And we could develop ideas out of all of those things. Where is the devil there? If perhaps his 7 sons and the 3 daughters was doing stuff that they wasn't supposed to do, you can say it's the devil's fault because of what they're doing. No, it's their fault. Look at the kind of father they have. You think they didn't know good from evil? If the father knows good from evil, if he turned away from evil, you think they didn't know what evil was? I'm sure that's not how our father operates. Our father teaches his sons, especially in this era. Today, probably not, but I'm talking about this. When I say this era, I'm talking about in the era where Job existed. In them times, fathers taught their sons and their daughters everything. Well, I'm saying that parenthetically. Not every last thing. But that's how fathers operated. They still operate so today, but maybe not as much. I don't know. I know that's how I operated. I try to talk to my sons. I try to show them. I try to teach. You know, the only thing I couldn't do is make them do it. I tell parents all the time, you ought to talk till you get blue in the face, and keep talking. Yeah, that's a parent, the life of a parent. If you want to know what a parent is a talking machine. Talk. You know, you could only whoop your child for so long. Because when they get old, you can't whoop them no more. You know, physically that is. You might whoop them verbally, but you still can't make them do nothing, whether you whoop them or not, right? They have a part to play in the whole scheme of things. Young and old. If they're young and you whoop them, they still have a part to play. Are they going to, that hurt, I ain't want that no more, so let me do the right thing now? The Proverbs say the foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, and the rod will drive it out. And some people have whooped their kids all the kids' lives, and the kids still grow up and be as bad as, you know, do some of the most gruesome things ever. You know, it happens. So the kid, you know, the mindset of the kid has a lot to play. But in the first 5 verses of Job, there's no talk about the devil and none of that stuff. There's evil. But where does the evil come from? Where is that? What is evil? Evil is anything you do that's against God, against what he wants done, against his instruction. That's evil. And what God said from the beginning is the same thing he said in the end. He didn't change anything. If it was evil in the beginning, it's still evil in the end. He doesn't change anything. And not because he didn't say it in the beginning doesn't mean it wasn't there in the beginning. You know what I'm saying? So now we rolling into other things, right? As the story of Job's life continue. Those first 5 verses, it was like a synopsis of who he was. This is the man we now going to deal with here. This man was so blameless and upright, feared God, and turned away from evil so much. He had 7 sons, 3 daughters. This is how the kids were. The kids seem to have a different kind of a nature, right? And the kids did things a little differently. And Job said, I see what I don't know what happens because I don't come to y'all stuff. But just in case, this is stuff I'm doing things the right way regardless of what you do. But just because you're my kids, I'm going to still try to do something for you. Try to help you out somehow. Best way I can. Tell you, hey, go take a shower and that's it. Sanctify yourself. Stay away from each other. Maybe in your own, as you're spending time by yourself and you're thinking about what you did last night, maybe you might cry out to God and ask God to forgive you. And then you add your prayers and what I did, and maybe God might forgive you. But we're not taking that for granted. So we're doing it every time. And that was his life. That was his lifestyle. That was the way he lived. His modus operandi, so to speak. So that's Job in a nutshell. Right? So as we're going to read now further. Now on the day, when God's sons came to present themselves before Jehovah, right? I'm going to just read the story for what it is. I'm not going into who's God's sons and all kinds of stuff. That's a different topic for a different day. It says, Satan also came among them. Again, what is an adversary, right? Somebody who comes to present the other side. Like how people say, I'm just playing the devil's advocate here. Again, nothing exists in a bubble by itself. Evil doesn't exist in a bubble by itself. Good doesn't exist in a bubble by itself. Positive doesn't exist in a bubble by itself. Negative doesn't exist in a bubble by itself. Nothing exists like that. Right? Where there is good, there is evil. Where there is evil, there is good. Where there is positive, there is negative. Where there is negative, there is positive. Positive doesn't exist over there and negative is over here. Where there is light, there is darkness. Because as soon as you take the light off, it gets dark. As soon as you put the light on, darkness disappears. You see what I'm saying? Everything is right there. Peeking at each other, seeing, okay, what you doing? Are you shining? Because if you're shining, I'm going to come. You know what I'm saying? When you shine it, I'm going to go. It's like light and dark have this conversation. As if it's a conversation, but they don't speak words, but I could put it in those words. You see what I'm saying? And so, this idea that there is somebody specifically called, somebody who has that specific ideal to oppose, that entity is not king in their world. That entity is part of the world. It's it's an integral part of everything. It's an integral part of creation. But there is a king of creation. There is a Lord of creation. There is a God of creation. And he's king over all things. This entity that's adversarial, the king, the God, the Lord, the Master, he could be that entity if he wants. Not he himself per se, but he can orchestrate it. He's the only one who can do that. Everybody else is pawns in the big game of chess. And it's not chess between two entities. It's this one entity playing chess by himself. Okay? I don't know if you understood what I just said. But this entity called the adversary, the Satan, he isn't king in his domain. He isn't king of the negative. Or he isn't king of evil. He's one king. And that king is king over everybody. I'm God, and beside me there is no other. There is only but one of me. Everybody else is subservient and subjected to me. Get it? Get the perception? That's what I'm talking about. That's the correct perception. So this entity now comes. He's among the crowd. And God singles him out. Jehovah singles him out. Hey, you, Mr. Adversary, come. I know you this is something you just love. This is who you are. Because I created you like that. Have you considered my servant Job? That's paraphrasing the conversation. Do you understand? Do you get the gist of what I just said? The adversary he doesn't have a mind of his own to say, well, no, I ain't consider Job. I ain't interested in Job. I'm going to leave Job alone. No. He's adversarial. That's his nature. And that's good, according to what the biblical narrative said. It's good to have that because it challenges this side. It makes this side keep the correct perception. Hopefully. Hopefully. I say hopefully because sometimes that side just convert. They just go all the way over and be like, you know what? I'm going to be adversarial. I'm going to embody the adversarialness of this entity. You understand what I'm saying? So he says, where you come from, man? Yo, Yeah, yeah, you. Who, me? Yeah, you. Where you come from? What you been doing? What you been doing? Just roaming around, just hanging out, watching people and stuff, you know, really doing anything. Just just chilling. You chilling? I don't think so. You that's not your nature. Your nature is not to chill. Your nature is to be adversarial. That's how I created you. So don't give me that. Don't give me that and expect me to just buy it. Don't sell me that. I ain't buying. So, in light of what I know, how you are, have you considered my servant Job? There ain't one like him in all the earth. Blameless and upright. You fear me? I see what he does. Even for his own children. I see what he does. And then Satan answers, verse 9. He doesn't do that for nothing. Well, nobody does anything for nothing. Really. God says, if you obey me, I'll bless you. You're not obeying him for anything. You're not obeying him for north. When you disobey him, you get north. That's what that north is. That's what zero entails. When you disobey him, you get nothing. When you obey him, you get a lot. Does Job fear you for nothing? Haven't you a hedge around him? Remember the angel? Around his house, around all that he has on every side. He always offering sacrifices and his heart is in the right place. But if you take your hedge from him, if you take your protection from him, if you move everything from him and you let me at him, I bet you he will what? He will, what did he say? What did he fear for his own children? He will renounce you in his heart. I bet you he will start to do stuff that he know he's not supposed to do. I bet you that. And God knows everything. God is like, yeah, right, you're stupid. Okay, go ahead. What's my point in telling this whole story for the last half an hour, 50 minutes or so? When you read the story of Job and you keep things in context, the one we call Satan, the one we call evil, the one we call the devil, he doesn't come in until after the narrative establishes who Job is. After the narrative establishes what Job's son does. The whole narrative gives you an insight into Job's perception of things. And Job had the correct perception. And who brings the adversary? Who invites this? As we continue to read Job from 1:6 through the end of Job, who sets up the whole story of Job? God does. He is the one. You could say God set up the adversary to show the adversary that he has no weight, no authority. He could only be adversarial. That's it. And you know why he could only be that way? Because I created him like that. That's all he can do. That's all he's designed to do, is to be adversarial. Let's go in another place. Before we close, we got 2 places to go. Let's go 1 Kings 22. I'm making a point. I'm showing us the kind of perceptions we ought to have. We ought to venture, we ought to endeavor to hold fast to this perception. God is God. He is in charge. He alone is in charge. The devil is not in charge of nothing. He is not even in charge of being adversarial to you. And if we could get that through our heads, I believe our eyes will begin to open and we begin to see things differently. I'm begin to look at the person that I work with differently. I begin to look at my neighbor differently. I begin to look at my wife differently, my husband differently, my kids differently. I begin to look at humanity differently. I begin to look at God differently. I give you enough time to get to 1 Kings 22, right? So, let's read 1 Kings 22. Let's start in the first verse. We're going to read a little bit and then go down. Let's start from verse 2. In the 3rd year, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. The king of Israel said to his servants, "You know that Ramoth Gilead is ours, and we do nothing, and we don't take it out of the hand of the king of Syria." He said to Jehoshaphat, "Will you go with me to battle to Ramoth Gilead?" Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, "I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses." Remember, this is in the time when Israel and Judah were divided. At one time, they were united under King David, King Solomon, Saul. No, there was it? I think they were united under Saul. Saul, David, and Solomon. Those were the 3 kings, right? That they had a united Israel. And after Solomon, that's when it became divided. It was divided before and after, right? We know the story about the prophecy that I think Rehoboam or Jeroboam got the prophecy where two pieces of the garment went with this one and 10 went with that one, right? So this is where we are. The kingdoms are divided. Jehoshaphat is the king of Judah, and who is the king of Israel? Somebody is the king of Israel. Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. So at this point, the king of Israel doesn't necessarily have a name. We can find the name, but we're not interested in the name right now. Okay? So it's King Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, talking to king of Israel. Well, we are one, which is truth. He's speaking truth. We are one nation, really are one people. So, you know what? Ramoth Gilead is ours. You said, okay, you want me to come with you? Yes, I'm coming with you. Everything I have is yours, basically is what he's saying, right? So Jehoshaphat, the king of Israel, supposed to be one of the good kings of Israel, he said in verse 5, we dunked in verse 5, he said to the king of Israel, before we join forces and go against this king of Syria, can we do this? Can we inquire from Jehovah? You see? That's what good kings do. That's what that's what righteous people do. When they want to do something, they inquire of God first. Why? Because they want to make sure they're doing the right thing. They want to make sure they're in step with what God is doing. So Jehoshaphat, who's supposed to be a good king of Israel, says to the king of Judah, hey, can we inquire first? Let's get a word from the God, from Jehovah. Verse 6. Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 men, and said to them, should I go down? Should I go against Ramoth Gilead to battle? Or should I refrain? And the prophet said, go up, for Jehovah will deliver it into the hand of the king. Okay. I'm kind of taking my time. I want to get to some place. And maybe we'll have to continue next week. But tell me what you find interesting about this conversation. Now, go dig in to find out who is this king that's speaking, because we know who he is. I just don't want to talk about him right now because that's not what I'm trying to develop. The idea is right. We get the prophets and we ask the prophets. He didn't tell the prophets, go find out from Jehovah. That's not what he said. He's asking the prophets to make a declaration. What do y'all think? So he's looking for opinions, right? He's looking for, not opinions necessarily, but he's looking for a positive word or a negative word, as the case might be. Go or stay, right? Positive as in go, negative as in stay, right? Because of what he's trying to accomplish. Okay? Now, the prophets all decide, go up, for the Lord will deliver. It didn't say anything about, well, the prophets say, let's go and inquire or anything like that. Right? The prophets seemingly just decided. I say seemingly just decided because of the way the narrative is written. It doesn't mean that they didn't go and find out. Verse 7. But Jehoshaphat said, isn't there a prophet of Jehovah that we may inquire of him? Wait a second. Why does Jehoshaphat think that the prophets that are here are not prophets of Jehovah? You follow what I'm saying? So somewhere along the line, even though these two kings got together and decided on a project, somewhere along the line, their perceptions they're not in line, right? The perceptions are not married. They're not in covenant. They're not meshed together. Somewhere along the line, there's a little rift somewhere along the line. And Jehoshaphat says, wait a second. Is there a prophet of Jehovah? So wait a second. What? Who these 400 prophets were? Okay. We could think about the 400 prophets of Baal. We could think about that. Okay. I don't want to get into that per se. I want to deal with these two perceptions. All right? Verse 8. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, there is yet one man by whom we may inquire of Jehovah, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, but I don't like him. Right? And a matter of fact, the word in my narrative says I hate him, which is like beyond not liking, right? Because he does not prophesy good concerning me, but evil. Jehoshaphat said, don't let the king say that. So in this narrative we just read, we can, there's a plethora of things going on. One king tells the other king, I'm with you. Let's go and let's win back Ramoth Gilead. Right? Because we are one people. Good. Good thought. Good idea. All good. That king just said, hey, but before we do anything, can we just get confirmation? Just get a word of Jehovah saying go. Because we know if Jehovah says go, then we ain't got no issues. We just go and we know victory is guaranteed, right? That's the perception of this one king. How do I know that? Because of what he said. Okay? Out of the abundance of your heart, your mouth speak. So, then the king, this other king, gets 400 men. 400 prophets. And these 400 prophets say, let's go. You're going to win. God is with you. Guaranteed. Wait a second. The king is still itchy. Still, I ain't sure about this, man. I ain't so sure. This is one king against another king. Not against, but, it's kind of right at this point, kind of like in opposition a little bit. Kind of a little bit satanic, if you will, because he's opposing, adversarial, if you will. Let's get a prophet of Jehovah. Well, wait a second. What happened to these 400 men? Apparently, this king doesn't consider them prophets of Jehovah. There's a little discrepancy right there in his heart, as far as we see that, right? The king of Israel now decides, remembers, says, wait a second. Yeah, there is one other prophet of Jehovah. But I don't like him. I hate him. Why? Why do you hate the person? Why do you slap the man? Why you slap the man? Because he doesn't prophesy good concerning me. He only prophesies evil. Well, what you call good and what you call evil? See what I'm saying? Perceptions, right? We're dealing with perception. What do you call good? And what do you call evil? If you're doing something that God doesn't warrant you doing, and a prophet comes to prophesy and says, stop, that's not a evil prophecy. That's a good prophecy. Okay? If you're doing something good, what God will encourage you to do, and the prophet comes and say, hey, continue doing that thing. That's not an evil prophecy. That's a good prophecy. But it all depends on what you're doing and what you are perceiving as good and evil. This king, the king of Israel, is saying, this prophet, I don't like him. I hate him because he never prophesies anything good when it comes to me. Well, if this man is a prophet of God and he apparently never prophesies anything good concerning you, my charge to you is you better go and examine what you do and ask the question, is it good or is it evil? You have to be able to determine what you do, if it's good or evil. But the only way you can determine that is how you look at God, how you perceive God. How do you perceive God? Do you perceive God as a God who will tell you, go slap that man because he said something that in your mind is not appropriate to say concerning your wife? And yes, every man, every father, every mom, every woman has a right to protect their family. So that's not the issue. The man says he has to protect his family. And I agree with that. But in the can of worms, we can't just mix up everything and say we're doing something good. Okay? We have to discern this foolishness and figure out, what are we doing? That's what Jehoshaphat is trying to do. So when you have a perception about a particular person because of how they come over, how they come across, because you're a king, and the person is trying to tell you, stop doing what you're doing, like Herod. You marry your sister's, your wife's sister and all kinds of stuff, and that's wrong. And you can't get mad at the man for saying that. John the Baptist said that, and Herod was upset because John the Baptist was correct. Herod, you can't be mad at the man who is opposing your actions, who is telling you that your actions are evil. But I want you to see that the king understands, even though he got 400 men here and they're all saying the same thing, there's other prophets. But he don't heed these other prophets because they don't agree with him. See? It's like when Joab told David, man, you don't have to do that. You don't have to go count the people. What the narrative said, the word of the king prevailed. Right? In this case, Joab wasn't a prophet, but yet he was prophesying. He was telling David what he should do. He was giving him advice, wise counsel. But David refused to listen. Right? In this case, this other prophet, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, was prophesying to this other king, telling him the right things, but the other king, because he's a king, thinks I'm doing the right thing. I'm the king, I can do what I want. I'm telling you, that's how kings, that's the mentality of kings. God is a king. Guess what? God does what he wants. And he seeks after the counsel of his own will. He doesn't ask me for advice. I wouldn't ask him. I wouldn't tell him to ask me for advice because I'm stupid. Don't come and ask me for advice, God. Listen, you the man. I need to ask you for advice. Jehoshaphat says, hey, hold up a second. Don't say that. You can't just, come on, man. He's a prophet of Jehovah. Don't say the man is just prophesy evil against you. Don't say that. So in this whole scheme of things here, Jehoshaphat sounds like a knowledgeable person, sounds like a wise person, a wise king, right? Who just doesn't listen to people when they, everybody, because everybody agree with him. No, he's still seeking, right? And the Proverbs says that in a multitude of counsel there is safety. So he's looking for counsel everywhere. He's not just going with the 450. He's still looking for that one opposing voice. Who is there out there that may have a different perception, a different idea of what we should do? Let me hear that, so at least I will consider that. Every wise king, that's how they should operate. Hear all the sides. Verse 9. Then the king of Israel called an officer and said, quickly, get Micaiah, the son of Imlah. So now, verse 10, the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat of Judah was sitting each on his throne, arrayed in their robes, in an open place at the entrance of the gate. That's how kings operate. When kings, if you read the book of Proverbs 31, I think, it talks about, the wise woman and her husband sit at the gates. He sit among the elders at the gates. That's because the king sits at the gates when he's making judgments, stuff like that. That's where the elders gather together. That's where the wise people, that's where people have, all these conversations going on. It's always at the gates of the cities, There's a whole different topic in there. I don't want to go into that. It will pull me off from what I'm trying to get to. But they're both sitting on their thrones, arrayed in their kingly garments, and in the open entrance and waiting. And all the prophets were prophesying before them, telling them, hey, this, go. God says this, thus said the Lord. You know, speaking how prophets speak. 11. Zedekiah, the son of Hananiah, made himself horns of iron and said, Jehovah says, with these you will push the Syrians until they are consumed. So this is a prophet, and this is how prophets, they would use things around them to declare prophecies. You know, it happened in the guy Abagas pulled the belt and tie it around Saul and tell him this is what, you know, prophets are like that. Right? Doesn't mean what they're saying is true and accurate, but that's how they are. Right? Verse 12. All the prophets prophesied so, or prophesied the same way, saying, go up to Ramoth Gilead and prosper, for Jehovah will deliver it into the hand of the king. Verse 13. The messenger who went to call Micaiah, spoke to him, saying, see now, the prophets declare good to the king with one mouth. Please let your word be like the word of one of them and speak good. So this messenger goes to this other single prophet, but the messenger is trying to encourage the prophet to just don't disagree. Don't say anything to see. Wow. I listen, man. Why? Don't say anything to disagree with them. This is what they're saying. So please, when you go, just agree with them. Just jump in, you know, say yes, this is what will happen. See, this is the messenger. This is the messenger. Is the messenger the prophet? No, but he is telling the prophet how to prophesy. Wow. You know, do what you want with that. "14. Micaiah said, as Jehovah lives, what Jehovah says to me, that I will speak." Do you understand the ferocity of these words? This man is going in the presence of 2 kings, in the presence of 400 prophets, so-called. And he is saying, I don't care who I'm going to speak to. I'm going to say whatever God says to say. That is some integrity. Okay? So, let's continue. I'm just building the story to get to the one spot I'm trying to get to. It's not far now. So, 15. When he had come to the king, and the king said to him, Micaiah, shall we go to Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we forbear? He answered him, go up and prosper, and the Lord Jehovah will deliver it into the hand of the king. This is what Micaiah said. He is agreeing with the 400 prophets. He just said, I'm just going to say whatever God tells me to say. You, Mr. Messenger, don't tell me what to say. You're not the prophet, I am. And if I'm the prophet, my job is to speak what thus saith the Lord, what thus saith Jehovah. That's what I'm going to do. So he gets in front of the king and basically tells the king exactly what everybody else says. Okay? Hold on to your chair. Hold on to your chair. Verse 16. The king said to him, this is obviously the king of Israel. How do I know? Let's read. The king said to him, how many times do I have to adjure you that you speak to me nothing but the truth in Jehovah's name? Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Did you hear that? The king of Israel called 400 of his prophets. They all say, go up. Jehovah is going to deliver Ramoth Gilead into your hand. Jehoshaphat inquires about any other prophets. There is one, I don't like him because he never said nothing good concerning me. He always prophesies some evil. But nevertheless, go get him. Let's hear what he's got to say. He comes, the one prophet who always opposing this other king, and says the same thing that these 400 prophets says. And here the king said, boy, haven't I always told you? Haven't I always warned you about lying to me? Is basically what he said, right? Haven't I always adjured you? Wait a verse. How many times do I have to adjure you that you speak to me nothing but the truth in Jehovah's name? Oh God, listen. This is mind-boggling here. We're talking about the devil. We're talking about the adversary. We're talking about the Satan. We're talking about Satan. We're talking about evil, wickedness, right? That we all say it's somebody else. It's always somebody else's fault. Like he just did. Verse 17. He said, this is the prophet Micaiah. He said, I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains as sheep that have no shepherd. Jehovah said, these have no master. Let them each return to his house in peace. So after the king of Israel adjures the prophet by chastising him and telling him, why are you lying to me, man? Wait a second. Did you just agree with everybody else? No, you lying. You lying. You see what I'm saying? We cannot discern good from evil. We don't have that kind of capacity. We have to depend on God. And when I say we don't have the kind of capacity, I'm not saying we cannot do it like verbatim. But the more we inquire of God, the more we seek God, the more we search him, the more we read, the more we gain the wisdom, the more it will give us the ability to discern good from evil. Even like Paul said in Corinthians. So the prophet now says a completely different thing. The king of Israel, in verse 18, the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, didn't I tell you that he would not prophesy good concerning me, but evil? Wait a second. He told you what everybody else said. You threatened him to tell you only what God said. Tell you the truth. Now he tell you the truth. Here's what you say. Didn't I tell you he never prophesies anything good? Did you see that? Verse 19. Micaiah says, therefore hear Jehovah's word. I saw Jehovah sitting on his throne, and all the army of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. Jehovah said, who will entice Ahab? There's a king. Who will entice Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? One said one thing, and another said another. Listen, people, we have to read. We have to get the correct perception. A spirit came out and stood before Jehovah and said, I will entice him. Jehovah said to him, how? He said, I will go out and be a lion spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. He said, you will entice him and will also prevail. Go out and do so. Did you hear that? Ooh, did you hear that? I'm going to stop there for today. I'm sorry to stop you on this high note, but read the story. Read the story and see who is in charge. Who is the king in charge? And how this king interacts with people. He is the King of Kings, the Good Shepherd, the only good king that exists. And he works with his creation to bring about his will. If his creation get the correct perception, because his ways are higher than our ways, and our ways are way beneath his ways. If we could elevate our thoughts and our hearts and our minds into him and see everything from his perspective and endeavor to attain the correct perception, that's when we will begin to do better. I'm going to leave you there for now. We will take this back up next week. Same time, same place, same channel. Turn with me in your Bibles to Numbers chapter 6, verse 22. Numbers chapter 6. Maxie, not Numbers 1. Numbers chapter 6 and verse 22. In closing, remember what Jehovah said in Exodus 23? Behold, I send my angel before you. Listen to his voice and obey him. For he will not, his charge is to bring you, keep you, guard you, protect you, and bring you to the place that I had for you. Do not disobey his voice, because he is not going to pardon your disobedience. Why? Because my name is in him. In closing, Numbers 6 and 22 as follows, through 27 reads as follows. And Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and to his sons, saying, this is how you shall bless the children of Israel. You shall tell them, Jehovah bless you and keep you. Jehovah cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Jehovah lift up his countenance towards you and give you peace. Here's the kicker. So they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Goodbye for now. Shavua Tov. Shabbat Shalom. Adios. Buenos dias. Buenas noches. Buenas tardes. Arrivederci. Until next time. Deuces. Bonne nuit. Peace. Ciao.